Good afternoon to all of you. This is Preeti Sagar and welcome back to Editorial Discussion. So, in today's session, I have taken up all such important editorials from The Hindu, which was published in the last week. So, first editorial of the day, that is about media and sedition. Basically, this article is related to Vinod Dua case in which he had been, because of his journalism, because of his reporting on particular issue, sedition charges had been imposed. So basically, right to speak or freedom of speech. So there is a line or thin line between or silver lining between freedom of speech and sedition charges, okay, or sedition or seditious acts. So basically, there should be a proper demarcation, what people should speak about, what people should criticize about rather, and what criticism should be regarded as sedition or whether it should not be regarded as sedition. The Supreme Court's ruling on the cases of sedition give hope the law will be re-examined. So context is that it's been long recognized that strident criticism of government will not amount to an attempt to excite disaffection and disloyalty towards government. Basically, we are living in a constitutional India, okay, where constitutional norms are set for all individuals of the country. In fact, all government authorities of the country, all journalists, or everyone. So every citizen of country, they are having certain rules and regulations which has been imbibed under Constitution. One freedom, you can say, that has been given regarding freedom of speech. So because we are living in a democratic world, we as we choose our own representatives, we make our own government who would rule us, who would govern us, and we have all the rights to criticize our government or our government policies if our representatives are not working at the power. So the Supreme Court of India has given its recent ruling under Vinod Dua case. Okay, so context is there that since it was long to recognize the criticism of government is not to be regarded as exciting disaffection and disloyalty towards government. So this is our freedom of speech, basically, to criticize our government, to criticize our government policies. Okay. So the archaic and colonial view that an intemperate attack on an incumbent ruler should be met with fierce prosecution for sedition prevails among many in power even today. And in this significant judgment, Supreme Court has quashed a criminal case registered in Himachal Pradesh against journalist Vinod Dua. Audio is disturbing, maybe because rainy season is going on, so maybe because of that network problem is there. So Supreme Court has, in the recent judgment, Supreme Court quashed the criminal case which has been charged in Himachal Pradesh against journalist Vinod Dua by invoking the narrowed down meaning of what constitutes an offense under Section 124A of IPC. Switching off the fan. I hope it's okay now. So Section 124A, that is one section of IPC, and under this, okay, chalo. Yeah. So under this section 124A of IPC, this sedition charge has been The sedition charge has been charged upon Vinod Dua when he criticized government policies, one of the government policies, and provision of. So this section 124A is the sedition charges or provision of seditions that was set out in Kedarnath Singh case. Okay, so every journalist, as per the court, is entitled to the protection of that judgment, which said that comments, however strongly worded, expressing disapprobation of actions of the government without exciting those feelings that generate the inclination to cause public disorder by acts of violence, would not be penalized. Okay. So this is this is the freedom of speech, that whatever comments, whether it is strongly worded or expression of disapprobation of actions of the government without inciting any ill feelings, okay, which would generate the inclination to cause public disorder or hamper the public order by acts of violence. So it would not be penalized. So law on sedition has come a long way from the formulation of British era judges Comer Pethiram and Arthur Strachey, that feelings of disaffection towards the government could not absence of affection. It means hatred, enmity, dislike, hostility, and every form of ill will towards the government. To be more rational reading that only a pernicious tendency to create public disorder would be an offense. See, being a journalist, what this person has done, he has just criticized government or any government certain policies, okay. So this sedition charges that or you can say the roots of this sedition charges, it was there during colonial rule or the British era time period, okay, where Comer Pethiran and Arthur Strachey, so they have both of them, they have defined the meaning of sedition. So this is what, this is feelings of disaffection towards government which connotes absence of affection, okay. The feeling of disaffection is what, absence of affection. So that may be hatred, enmity, dislike, hostility, and any form of ill will towards government. So if it is more radical or sorry, more rational, so that only a pernicious tendency to create public order. So this is what, this is the colonial era law, okay. So it appears that every generation needs a judicial iteration of this principle, and that is because of two reasons: that section 124A remains on the statute book, and that powerful political figures and their minions are unable to take criticism in their stride. So but we are living in the democracy, okay. Earlier it was a monarchy. So in monarchy it may be a sedition, but in democracy this freedom or this much freedom is given or imbibed to every citizens of India. So this section 124, this is a colonial era time law, okay. So this is and this is under statute book, this is not the part of constitution. So powerful political figures and their what's it, minions, they are unable to take criticism, okay, and they look out for section 124 to be imposed upon against the ill wills, okay, against the criticism of the government, whosoever has done that. So enacted to put down journalistic criticism of the colonial administration from an increasingly vocal press, section 124A is essentially a provision that seeks to protect government's institutional vanity from disapprobation, using the interest of public order and security of the state as a fig leaf, and it has often been criticized for being vague and overbroad. Its use of terms like bringing government into hatred or contempt and disloyalty and all feelings of enmity continues to help the police to invoke it whenever there is either strong criticism or critical depiction of unresponsive or insensitive rulers. So wherever these kind of criticism or critical comments or critical depictions are there, so these people, these politicians or government, they try to impose this section 124 on that critique. So the explanation that disapproval of government actions or measures with the view of altering them by lawful means will not amount to an offense is not enough to restrain the authorities from prosecution. So if criticism of government is there, so explanation which is disapproving government actions or measures by viewing to altering them, it means government, by criticizing government acts, government maybe alter it, okay, maybe alter that policy. So and by lawful means it would happen, so it will not amount to any offense, and it is not enough to restrain authorities from any kind of prosecution. So mischief lies in the latitude that gives to the police by insecure political leadership to come down on the government's adversaries. And that is unfortunate that bench did not go into the aspect of political motivation behind the police while it register FIRs without checking if the required ingredient of incitement of violence is present or not. So this is the loophole from the law and order side, from the police side. If criticism has been done and that government authority or a government official, what's a any spokesperson from government side, if they have filed a case against that critique, then police need to go through the section entirely. It should go through whether it is applicable on the law or not, on the case or not. whether criticism has been done to incite violence or not. If it has been done to incite violence, then it will be regarded as sedition. So court's verdict brightens the hope that sedition's validity will be re-examined. That needs to be re-examination. And for now, it's a blow for free speech and media freedom. So this much freedom need to be given to media so that freedom of speech can be promoted. Okay, can be seen in the country. Basically, what is the importance of freedom of speech? Freedom of speech, basically it gives freedom to the individuals of the country, or to the citizens of the country, so that if they are not happy with the government policies, with any of the policies, at least they have this words, they have this voice to talk about it. So government might hear public sentiment, they might know public sentiment, they might change that policy if it is not favorable or suitable to the people or citizens of the country. Ultimately, the lawmaking is for whom? That is for the citizens of the country. That is in a democratic India, what we say, democracy means of the people, by the people, for the people. So when it is for the people, it is by the people, and it is of the people, it means everything belongs to the people. So decision makers are people, but representatives do that. So if representatives are not doing it in the correct manner, then we have this freedom that we can talk about it, we can criticize it, and this criticism would follow the correctness or correctedness of the policy by government. Okay, they can re-examine it. Okay, so that is all about this article. Next article is about diminishing options. RBI has little room to use internet rates for achieving policy outcomes. Interest rates, I'm sorry. So recently, Monetary Policy Committee has met up, and what all RBI has done. So we'll talk about that. So context is that RBI's latest policy statement underscores the diminishing options which is available to it to address the economic fallout from COVID-19 pandemic. So RBI's Monetary Policy Committee. So basically, Monetary Policy Committee is a 6-member committee in which governor and deputy governor, they are governor is official chairman, and other so 3 people from RBI and 3 people from government side. So 3 government side, these are nominees of government basically. So this smaller information you need to have it regarding MPC. So basically, RBI's Monetary Policy Committee, they have left benchmark interest rate that has unchanged for a 6th straight meeting. It means 6th meeting has been done, and the benchmark rate, that is the repo rate and all. So the benchmark rate at which commercial banks provide loans to the people, and so this benchmark rate has been unchanged. Why it has been unchanged? Because it was required to be changed. Why? Because inflation is going on, because of lacking or because of lagging in the economic activities in country because of pandemic. So it was required to control inflation, to do some changes in the interest rates. But MPC this time as well, it has left benchmark rate unchanged for the 6th straight meeting, and reiterated that it would keep its policy stance accommodative as long as necessary to revive and sustain growth on a durable basis. So policy stands accommodative, and it will look out the necessity to revive and sustainable growth on the desired durable basis. So since May 2020, to cut interest rate by 40 basis points, taking the cumulative reduction in borrowing costs in the wake of pandemic's onset in 215 basis points, MPC has found itself in a bind. During while its first lockdown that constricted supply and demand for much of quarter first of the last fiscal, pushing the economy into a record of 29.4% contraction during April-June, and that caused full year GDP shrunken to 7.3%. Second wave has crushed all round demand and consumer confidence. So RBI's May round of consumer confidence survey that shows the current situation index at a new all-time low, that is with 75% of households who perceived economic and employment situations as having worsened further, and the future expectation index reflecting overall pessimism. And it has become hard to see the mere availability of low cost credit that helps to revive the all important consumption demand. So economy needs to revive itself by infusing demands in the country. So MPC acknowledged the bleak outlook when it slashed its projection for first quarter growth by as much as 770 basis points to 18.5% from 26.2% it has forecast just on April 7. Banking more on optimism than hard data, the panel has bumped up its growth estimates for the second half that results in an overall cut of only 1 percentage point to its full year growth forecast at 9.5%. For that, it has assumed rural demand will remain buoyant on the back of an unexpected normal monsoon. And while noting that widespread infections in rural areas that likely to lead to a sequential decline in tractor and two-wheeler sales in April, that may undermine future demand. Okay, so because monsoon is going to be normal. Okay, so expectation is to have normal monsoon, and because of that widespread in and another thing is that in rural areas virus has been widespread, or that likely led to sequential decline in tractor purchasing and two-wheeler sales as well in the month of April. So it implies what? It implies future demand. Maybe in future it may go up, it may go down. If infection will be continued, then it will go down. So other factor that RBI is banking on to provide a fillip to economic activity is an accelerated pace of vaccinations over which it has virtually no control. So RBI basically economy, what it is saying, economy can only be controlled when health sorry, when health condition could be improved. And how health condition could be improved? By the way of vaccination, because infection can be curbed by the way of vaccination. People can come out of the houses, they can go for the economic activities, then economy would be boosted up, then economic growth can be seen. So here first thing or first factor is what? To accelerate pace of vaccination, that on which RBI has no virtual control in it. So to be fair, Governor Shantikant Das has used the bank's liquidity spigot as a tool to address some of the economic distress. And as a series of measures, focus on bolstering credit flow to the hardest hit MSME and contact intensive industrial and services sectors, respectively. Still, MPC can ill afford to drop the ball on its primary remit that ensures inflation remains anchored. And with the international commodity prices, which includes crude oil, on an upward trajectory and no signs of domestic policy start to check skyrocketing petrol and diesel pump prices, inflation is sure to accelerate. That pose a major conundrum to the RBI. So inflation is going to be increased, okay, because of international commodity prices like crude oil. Upward trajectory of crude oil has been seen. It means increasing price of crude oil has been seen. Then domestic policy support, no signs had been seen. Skyrocketing petrol and diesel prices are there. So these factors would lead to rise in inflation. Raising rates could risk hurting recovery. What happens in the economy if inflation has increased? Then policy rates can be increased. Okay, benchmark rate can be increased so that credit policy can be curbed down. Okay, so because the inflation in the country, it is not because of demand. Okay, it is not because of uncontrolled demand, but it is because of bottleneck in supply. It is because of bottleneck in economic activity. So that is why and international price as well, international commodity prices as well. So these factors has led to increased inflation in the country. So cut or increase in the policy rate is not going to help. Okay, so it could risk hurting recovery, and not doing so could heighten inflation. So if policy rates or benchmark rate would be increased, then economic recovery would be hurted. Okay, and if it will cut down, or if nothing could be done, then inflation will be increased. So these twin problems our country is facing in the economic term. Okay. Now, next article, that is about recognizing sex work as work. Adults who earn by providing sexual services should be granted basic labor rights. So basically, this article is about sex workers. Okay, whatever work these sex workers are doing, that should be regarded, or that should come under labor law, so that they can also get benefits of it. They can also be regarded as labor, and they can get the benefits what laborers are getting. For example, maternity benefit. Okay. For example, whatever, let's say, social benefits and occupational safety, and also all such standards and measures would be applicable to these sex workers if they will be regarded as labor. So context is what the pandemic has hit millions of people and caused a great deal of suffering across communities. But there is one community that is especially hard hit, and that is sex workers. So, owing to the non recognition of sex work as legitimate work, sex workers have mostly been kept at arm's length from the government's relief programs. COVID-19 has provided more reason to consider a long pending demand of workers in India, that is decriminalization of sex work and guaranteed set of labor rights. So first is what government should decriminalize sex work, and they should guarantee labor rights. Okay. So an archaic regressive view that the legislation governing sex work in India is the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act. And Suppression of Immoral Traffic in Women and Children Act was enacted in 1956. Subsequent amendments had been made to the law, and the name of the act was changed to Immoral Traffic Prevention Act. Legislation penalizes acts like keeping a brothel, soliciting into a public place, living off the earnings of sex work, and living with or habitually being in the company of a sex worker. So, this act represents the archaic and regressive view that sex work is morally wrong and that the people who are involved in it, especially women, they never consent to it voluntarily. So, after all, the popular depiction, the entry into sex work is involuntary, because this is what this is forced one. Okay, these girls or the girls from the poor area or poor countries, these are abducted illegally, they are trafficked, and they forcefully they are dumped into sex work. Okay, so this is what this is forced and through deception, not their voluntarily they come into this sex work. So as a consequence, it was believed that these women need to be rescued and rehabilitated, and sometimes even without their consent. So while this is a valid argument for minor girls, for many consenting adult sex works, it has been a problem. And this is what has led to the classification of respectable women and non-respectable women. This view is based on the belief that sex work is easy work and no one will or should choose to practice it. So it thus perpetuates the prejudice that women who do practice sex work are morally devious, and the act has not criminalized sex work but also further stigmatized and pushed it underground. Thus, it leaves sex workers more prone to violence, discrimination, and harassment. So, Act denies an individual their right over their bodies, and it imposes the will of the state over adult that articulates their life choices. So if it gives no agency to the sex workers to fight against the traffickers, and they have made them more susceptible to be harassed by the state officials. So Immoral Trafficking Act, it fails to recognize that many women, they are willingly enter into agreement with the traffickers, and sometimes they just to see a better life as chosen by them. Evidence shows that many women choose to remain in sex work despite opportunities to leave after rehabilitation by the government or non-government organization. But what are the reasons behind it? So Justice Verma Committee, that has also acknowledged that there is a distinction between women who are trafficked for commercial sexual exploitation and adult, and consenting women who are in sex work of their own volition. So some comes with their own volition, some comes forcefully, okay, or what's say illegally. So we must recognize sex work as work and stop ourselves from assigning morality to their work. Adult men, women, and transgender persons in sex work, they have right to earn by providing sexual services, live with dignity, remain free from violence, exploitation, stigma, and decriminalization. And it is the time where we need to rethink that sex work from a labor perspective, where we recognize their work and guarantee them basic labor rights. Basically, they go if sex work regarding sex work in country, as I've said, poor people or the sections of poor sections of the society, they fell prey to it. Okay, the girls from the poor population, they fell prey to it. Illegally they are trafficked to different countries and they are forced to do sex work. Okay, so here Justice Verma committee, it has suggested that people should be away from being moral, moral teachers, or uh, uh, they should not impose morality on these work. Okay, because everyone, whether men, women, transgenders, so they are doing it because of their bad fate, or because of so and so reasons. This is not their voluntarily they come into this. Okay, this is not their choice, but this becomes compulsion after falling into it. And even if after rehabilitation they have no option to go outside, they have no option to do any other work, that is why they choose to remain a sex work. So that is that Justice Verma has said that despite of being a moral teacher, or assign morality to the sex work, what we should help them. We should help them in a way that labor, they should be regarded as labor right. They should be regarded as they are having labor rights. Okay, they should be regarded as labor and provide labor rights to them. Okay, so we need to rethink that sex work from the labor perspective, and we need to recognize that their work should guarantee them basic labor rights. So judiciary is moving in the direction of recognizing sex workers' right to livelihood. And Supreme Court in Buddhadev Karmaskar versus State of West Bengal opined that sex work has a right to dignity, and Parliament must also take a relook at the existing legislation and do away with the victim rescue rehabilitation narrative. During these times of crisis, especially, this is all the more important. So that's all about this article. Okay, so the crux of the article is that now this is the right time where this sex work need to be considered as labor, and the workers need to be given labor rights. Okay, set of labor rights. Next article is about school ranks. High performing states with good schools can nudge others if they have political will. So this is regarding the performance, school performance, on in which Chandigarh, Kerala, they have become top. So context is that the Union Education Ministry has been attempting to get states into a competitive mode in upgrading their school education system by recognizing progress with a performance grading index that assigns them a score. So this performance grading system that has been published recently, in which some schools have done very good. So that can be argued that countries and state governments, they use school education as a transformative tool, most effectively where political imperative is very much strong. Center's effort with the performance grading index, that score system has been to try and nudge all states using a Hall of Fame approach. And in the latest set of scores and grades for pre-COVID-19 year 2019-20, where Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Chandigarh, Kerala, Punjab, and Tamil Nadu have performed the best, although they still fall short of 95 to 11,000 points slab, the highest possible. That is the highest possible one. So it should be heartening to 33 states and UTs that their performance rating index scores have improved over the previous year. And in the case of Andaman and Nicobar, Punjab, and Arunachal Pradesh, by a noteworthy improvement of 20%. So several middling states continues to make marginal progress. Some have improved merely by tweaking their data, while Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, they actually regressed, although the PGI scheme is now 3 years old now. So that was the third edition of this PGI. So it has shown that middling states, they continue to marginal progress. They are progressing continuously, and some have improved by doing some changes in their data. Like Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, these are actually regressed. So regressed approach has been seen. So score is derived using databases of 70 parameters like access, equity, governance process, infrastructure and facilities, learning outcomes that are mostly self-reported by the states but vetted by the center, with national achievement survey data also being incorporated. And on some parameters like uneven learning outcomes between students from deprived communities and others that bring the gap earns a better score. So a center with its transparent scores and data for each parameter and subtopic that made available in the public domain, that seeks to create a resource sharing system that low performing states can tap into. And this initiative is laudable, but it can work only if governments and opposition parties see value in strong and open school education and work to strengthen access, equity, and infrastructure by budgeting fees and funds for universalization. And in a such commitment that led to Southeast Asia to carry out a renaissance in school education in the later decades of the last century on the lines of Meiji era Japan. India's school system that has to contend with the not just patchy access and infrastructure, but major equity issues that have come to the fore during the pandemic. And clearly, the shadow of COVID 19 that will persist over the education system for the foreseeable future, and further progress on all parameters uh, that will depend on bridging the gaps, and particularly on digital tools, infrastructure, and subsidies for access. So, because of COVID 19, the shadow of this had been seen in education system, and for the unforeseeable future we have seen, and further progress on all such parameters, whether it is accessibility, equity, cleanliness, or all such parameters. So that will depend on bridging the gap, and particularly on the digital tools. Basically, in during COVID-19, the gap in the education system has been found on the digital platform. Many schools of urban area, many schools in rural areas, they are basically not providing not providing digital education because of lacking of digital tools in rural areas and in some parts of the urban areas. Many people, they do not have laptops or mobile phones to, so that they can use or avail this facility. So this has to be, and this is what this is the particular ground of digital tools, infrastructure, and subsidies for access. So improvement on these parameters need to be seen. So PGI scores shows that southern and western states are from are on firm ground to achieve this, and those in central India and parts of east and northeast east India, they are less resourced. So southern and western state schools, they have achieved these parameters. They have worked well on these parameters, but central Indian schools and east and northeastern state schools, they are lacking in all such digital tool facilities or all such resources. So what is evident from the education ministry analysis, that governance process are the weakest link in some states. A new deal for schools can transform them as the right to education law envisages. So these inequalities need to be worked upon by education ministry so that they can work to provide right to education to each and every citizen, every students of the country, or this right to education should reach to a last mile of the country. So basically, in this article, what you need to read about, what you need to learn about, that the performance of these schools, that is based on certain parameters, but what other schools have not been performed. So one thing you need to understand, that gradual improvement has been seen, but schools of central India, east and northeast India, they are lacking in resources, and that is why these schools or areas, schools of these areas have not improved much. Now, Next article that is about towards a stronger mental health strategy. More need to be done in India in the context of COVID-19, which has exacerbated mental illness. Basically, mental health system, if we talk about, so this is another health ailment which India is not taking care of. Many of the instances, many of the cases of mental health illness had been seen, but proper care, proper protection is not being provided. Where we see physical health related issues, where infrastructure is lacking, where hospital beds are lacking, where what's say medical equipments are lacking. But if we talk about particularly regarding mental health, okay, so in this particular field, lots of lacking of resources can be found, whether it is about medical facilities, okay, it is about mental hospital beds, or a particular ward for the mental wing. So all such resources are lacking in the country. Another thing is that during COVID-19 era, the cases of mental health illness has increased because of depression, because of loss of jobs, because of too many reasons. Okay, so context is that mental health issues are a major health challenges in the world today, and as per WHO, there is 10 to 25-year life expectancy. That reduction in patients with severe mental health disorders, and about 72% of the member states have a stand-alone policy or plan for mental health in 2017. India introduced National Mental Health Policy in 2014 and a rights-based Mental Health Care Act in 2017 that has replaced the Mental Health Care Act of 1987. NMHP, National Health Mission, National Adolescent Health Program, and Ayushman Bharat that have the necessary components to address the mental health issues of all the sections of its population, but more needs to be done in the context of COVID-19, which has exacerbated mental illness everywhere. So this national mental health policy that India introduced in 2014, and right-based mental health care act in 2017 that replaced mental health care act of 1987. So under this NMHP, National Health Mission, National Adolescent Health Program, and Ayushman Bharat, they have necessary component to address mental health issues of all the sections of the population. Okay, but problem is what? But during the in the context of COVID-19, this mental health illness has exacerbated or increased. Okay, it has aggravated. What are the reasons? We'll talk about. So studies in the Lancet Public Health 2019 has revealed that median mental health spending across the world was around 2% of the total government and health expenditure in 2015. And in the case of low income countries, it was around 0.5% of their health budget. And for lower middle income countries, it was 1.9%. And for upper middle income countries, it was 2.4%. Sorry, 1.9% for upper middle income countries, and 2.4%. And for higher countries, it was only 0.5. For lower middle countries, it was 1.9% of GDP spending, and upper middle income countries, it was 2.4% of GDP spending, and in the higher income countries, it was 5.1% of GDP spending. So higher income group countries, they are spending much on mental health illness. Okay. In developed countries than in developing countries. Shows as a percentage of total government expenditure on mental health is 1.3% in India. And in developed countries, it ranges from 3 to 15%. So government expenditure on hospitals, on those hospitals who are dealing with the mental health issues. So they are having total government expenditure percentage on mental health. So in India, government spends 1.3%. In developed countries, this spending ranges between 3% to 15%. Okay, it depends. So in India, the share of mental hospitals over So share of mental hospitals per 1 lakh population is very much low, as and this is as low as 0.01%, 0.01% in line with developing countries as per WHO. And this may possibly because of lacking of focused attention given to mental health as compared to other major diseases in India. So mental health, basically it is aggravated, but much focused attention is not being given to mental health illness in India as compared to other major diseases. So in the distribution of mental health units in general hospitals, like per 1 lakh population globally, in 2016, India has been ranked 114 with just 0.03 units per 1 lakh population. And India came on 99th position in the distribution of mental health outpatient facilities as per 1 lakh population with 0.18 units per 1 lakh population. India came on 64th position in the distribution of mental health day treatment facilities per 1 lakh population. So residential mental health services like community ones, these are important components for good quality mental health care. And in most industrialized economies, there has been a growth of community healthcare facilities in line with the increase in patients with mental health issues. Research also shows that long-term patients with mental health issues, they usually admitted to the residential facilities. So the distribution of community residential facilities globally for the median year 2016 shows the data of India came on 58th position with 0.017 units per 1 lakh population among WHO member countries. So people who are working in the mental health sector, they help us to understand mental health issues better. And India was ranked 107 with 0.292% per population. Nurses, social workers, psychologists who are working in the mental health sector per 1 lakh population in India are 0.796, 0.065, 0.069 respectively. It means lower number of nurses in mental hospitals, lower number of social workers who are working in the field of mental health, and psychologists who treat them. So these are very, very low in our country. Leading countries in each of these three areas have 150.3, 145.4, 222.6 per 1 lakh population. And India is lagging far, far, far behind. So India's ranking in this context among WHO member countries was 97, 79, and 104 respectively. So mental illness include anxiety disorders, psychotic disorders, mood disorders, substance use disorder, personality disorders, and eating disorders. So these are basically these get starts or get what's say ignition with depression, deep thinking, or overthinking on any of the issues. So because of that, depression comes. Because of that, these many disorders comes. Okay, and mental illness, it is not about that people go mad. It is about the different levels or different sections of the mental illness, whether it is different types of disorders. Anxiety, it may be psychotic, it may be mood disorder, it may be substance use disorder, it may be personality disorders, and eating disorders. So majority of suicides in the world, these are related to psychiatric problems or to the illness. This is listed as per in the above line. So death by suicide, it is a complex phenomenon and it is not fully reported. And globally, suicide rate was 10.6 per 1 lakh population. And if we talk about in India, it is 16.3 1 lakh population per 1 lakh population in 2016. It means number of deaths because of mental health illness, it is greater or it is higher than the developed countries. But spending of India on mental health treatment, it is very, very, very less. In fact, the what's say that doctors, nurses, psychiatrists, this is also very less in India. So suicide rates, these are higher among males as compared to females, and mental health may not be the primary concern in developing economies like India, as there may be other communicable and non-communicable diseases that may be more prevalent. And there are also challenges that regarding funding, delivery of mental health packages, lack of trained staffs, etc. So these challenges that need to be considered more seriously in the wake of COVID-19, as mental health issues are widely prevalent among the Indian population because of lockdowns and related issues. Recent reports published in Lancet has revealed that 1 in 7 people in India had mental disorder that range from mild to severe in 2017. The proportional contribution of mental disorders to the total disease burden had doubled between 1990 and 2017. Mental disorders includes depressive and anxiety disorders, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorders. Situation was generally worse in the southern states as compared to the northern states because of nature of development, modernization, urbanization, and other factors not understood yet. So basically, the reasons behind mental health disorders, these are what? These are development, modernization, urbanization, and there are various other factors which need to be studied. Okay, so depressive disorders that are more prevalent among females than males, that could be because of sexual abuse, gender discrimination, stress because of antenatal and postnatal issues, and various other reasons maybe. So depression cases can be seen more in the females because of the ill treatment what they get in their houses. Okay, whether it is domestic violence, whether it is antenatal prenatal issues, whether it is because of stress because of antenatal and postnatal, gender discrimination in their home, okay, sexual abuse, child abuse, you can say. So because of that, depression or the depressive disorders can be seen among female, but death is higher of male, okay, as compared to female. So in order to further address mental health issues, India could reduce the treatment gap for mental disorders, that increase the number of personnel in the mental health sector, work towards reducing discriminatory attitudes, and devise an integrated approach for detecting, treating, and managing patient needs. More counseling facilities, especially in rural areas, with special support for women through the provision of women doctors, are required. Telemedicine, telephone-based helpline numbers, and mental health apps could also help in this. So these facilities should also be provided. Communities and families, they have an important role in this regard, and so do community-based programs. School-based programs on mental health can improve the mental health of children. More fund allocation for treatment of mental health, especially to those states in the need of funds, could do wonders. Pandemic may be the best time to explore various policy options, which includes creating online mental health awareness. And there need to be a roadmap for mental health awareness program. This should include traditional media, government programs, education system, industry, and social media. So media awareness and government involvement is already happening in India, but both can improve. And it is high time that industry and private sector companies set up counseling facilities. Application of big data, crowdsourcing, ideas that may help us in informed decision making. So basically, this mental health treatment, it is not only about providing facilities, it is also about tracking of the disease or tracking of the patients who had got treatment, and the big data, okay, application of big data and crowdsourcing, so that the exact data of those mental disorder patients can be should be known, okay, can be taken idea of this. So these can help to inform or say to get information about decision making regarding these mental what say health illnesses. Now, next article is about belligerent and pushback. As the Quad gains momentum, states in the Indo-Pacific and South Asia are most likely to resist Chinese largesse. Context is that in May, another Brazil display on its wolf warrior diplomacy. China has issued a strange warning to Bangladesh, a nation that it has tried to cultivate assiduously over several years. And while suggesting that China considers the Quad to be a minor anti-China initiative, Chinese ambassador to Bangladesh, Li Jiming, has warned Dhaka that there will be substantial damage in the bilateral ties between China. Basically, China is taking up Quad as anti-China initiative, and it is threatening Bangladesh that if Bangladesh would Quad, then what will happen? It will China will broken up ties with Bangladesh. China has given loans to Bangladesh, okay, for infrastructure development. So if bilateral ties between both the countries will get damaged, so the repercussion would be faced by Bangladesh, not by China, okay, because these countries, smaller countries, they have already been debt trapped by China. So this threat has been given by China to Bangladesh that not to join Quad, and if it do so, then bilateral ties will be hampered or damaged. So it was an extraordinary statement by a diplomat in a host nation, but it had all the chutzpah that Chinese diplomats think they deserve to embed in their seemingly non-diplomatic outpourings. Bangladesh Foreign Minister, who is A.K. Abdul Momen, he promptly and publicly challenged the Chinese envoy statement and underlining categorically that Dhaka pursues an independent foreign policy. Chinese Foreign Ministry that continue to target Quad as a small clique against China and has said that remarks that expresses opposition to this mechanism are not about interference but about expressing opposition to small cliques and bloc politics. So this episode has captured the emerging fault lines in South Asia and wider Indo-Pacific in ways that these both are revealing and challenging. So as the tectonic plates in Indo-Pacific shift, major players are making their moves and testing the waters. And for all its attempts to play down the relevance of the Quad, China realizes that the grouping, with all its weaknesses, is emerging as a reality, and there is little it can do to prevent that. So, all such attempts that has played down the relevance of Quad in China, realizing that the grouping is having all its weaknesses and it can emerge as a reality, and there is little it can do to prevent that. So, it has tried, but it has failed. And it is agitated about Quad's future role and the potential success in offering regional states as an alternative to its own strong arm tactics. Quad member states, they are busy in figuring out a cohesive agenda amongst themselves, and there are no plans for any expansion of Quad groupings. There is a desire to work with like-minded nations, but that can only happen if the four members of the Quad can build a credible platform first. So it means it is important that Quad countries, they need to strengthen their ties first, then they need to look over all such like-minded countries and expand Quad. Okay. So what China is doing, that is its insecurity, what it is throwing up on the other smaller nations. Okay. And it is trying to build its relationship or maintain its relationship on the basis of threat. Okay. By threatening all smaller states against joining the group Quad. Just a moment. So no one is sending. So the Quad members, they have to strengthen themselves, then they need to think about expansion. So no one is sending out invitations to join Quad, and no one has shown any interest in to become part of the Quad. But in China, it wants to ensure that after failing in its initial attempts to prevent Quad from gaining any traction, its message is well understood by other states who may harbor any desire of working closely with Quad members to uphold a rule-based order in the Indo-Pacific. So what China is doing, basically, it is preventing itself, not itself, but it is preventing all such countries by issuing all such these kind of statements. So it is basically doing an effort so that countries should be known or should be aware of the intention of China, that if any smaller countries, if they at any point of time became part of Quad, became member of Quad, then all such ties between all such countries with China, it will be vanished, it will be broken up. So the repercussion of this breaking of ties will hamper or fall on those smaller countries, not on China. Basically, that is China's message by giving this message to Bangladesh. So it has basically gave awareness or gave its message to all such countries. So Beijing that wants to ensure that after failing its initial attempt to prevent that Quad from gaining any traction, its message is to be well understood by other states who may harbor or who may have any desire of working closely with the Quad members to uphold rule-based order in the Indo-Pacific. And with this message to Dhaka, Beijing was laying down a marker that nations should desist from engaging with the Quad. So countries should take a distance, should maintain a distance with these Quad members, with these Quad countries, if they wish to work with China. Then, so Bangladesh foreign, sorry, we have already discussed about that. So of course, the aggressive diplomacy is likely to have have the opposite effect, but that is for the future. And for the moment, it is enough for Beijing to showcase its public disapproval of a platform that has gained rapid traction. Beijing or China has failed to prevent nations from west to east from coming out with their Indo-Pacific strategies, and it has failed to prevent operationalization of the Quad, and now it might be worried about other nations in the region thinking on engaging with the Quad more proactively. Bangladesh is planning to come out with its own Indo-Pacific strategy, and China has now warned Bangladesh that a close cooperation with Quad should not be the part of the policy mix. So this is just the beginning. As Quad gains more momentum, and the churn in the waters or Indo-Pacific leads to new countervailing coalitions against China. Beijing's belligerence can only be expected to grow. Okay, so if China will go belligerent against all such nations, against all such countries who may part or who may establish ties with the Quad members or Quad countries. So for many regional states in South Asia and the Indo-Pacific, it has been a smooth ride so far, with China being the only game in town. And for all the criticism China has heaped on the Quad's members for trying to create an exclusive clique, it will be Beijing that is likely to demand clear-cut foreign policy choices from its regional interlocutors. And states are more likely to push back than become subservient to Chinese largesse. So that is all about this article. Moving on to the next. This time for Malé. Maldives and India have an opportunity to work for changing power structures at United Nations. Context is context is about that in United Nations General Assembly, Maldives is representing Southeast Asia. Okay, so election of Maldives Foreign Minister Abdullah Shahid as the president of 76th session of United Nations General Assembly. So this is for the first time Maldives has got the presidentship of UNGA Assembly. So 76th session is going to be held in September 2021-22, and Maldives has won the seat or won the election to chair 76th meeting of United Nations General Assembly. So that is a major boost for the island nation's international profile. So it has given a boost to the international profile of Maldives this time. So election marks for the first time that Maldivian will hold the post in the United Nations history, and his margin of victory, that is 143 of his challengers 48, that indicates support from nearly 3/4 of all the countries at the UN is very much significant. So 48 has been opposed, and other member countries they gave vote in favor of Maldives. So this is very, very significant for Maldives this time. Maldives also sees it as a win for the 2052 member small island developing states, which are battling climate change vulnerability and other developmental challenges. And in addition, in a year when events in Afghanistan will draw attention as US forces begin to pull out, uh, Mr. Shahid's victory over this surprise opponent, former Afghanistan Foreign Minister Zalmai Rasool, that is remarkable. And for India too, that helped Maldives canvas support outcome is very much welcomed. Not only because of its close ties with Mali, but also the high record of Mr. Shahid as a key member of the Soli government. So they break from the norm of not announcing one's choice for an election by secret ballot. Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla had announced that India for the Maldives in November 2020. South Block's explanation being that Afghanistan had not yet announced Mr. Rasool's candidature, which it did in January 2021. India should now ensure that Afghan government carries had even yeah, I'm sorry. So um, the decision of Afghanistan was very much late, and it did not consult in process of United General Assembly. And Maldives, meanwhile, it had gained support of the question of this. Afghanistan had to face, okay, that it has lost the race. So focus has now shifted to the tenure and South Asian issues like impact on the coronavirus pandemic, equitable access to vaccines. Cooperation is close, and Mr. Shahid is in the discussion to appoint an Indian diplomat as his chief aide. Given that the previous president of General Assembly from Turkey had ruffled feathers with his remarks in Islamabad that Pakistan was duty bound to raise Jammu and Kashmir dispute more strongly at United Nations. And Mr. Shahid's tenure is expected to see a far smoother term for India, especially as the Modi government is focusing on showcasing the country at United Nations during India's 75th independence anniversary, which is going to be celebrated next year. Above the all, it is hoping that India in the United Nations Security Council and the Maldivian President of General Assembly will work in tandem, and New Delhi pursues its goal for multilateral reforms and re-energize the dormant process of effecting change in the old power structures in the global body. So that is all about this article. Now, state interventions, Lakshadweep future, the archipelago's integration into the mainstream should not lead to emotional alienation and physical damage. Context is that Lakshadweep, मैंने तो rejoin कर लिया था ना. Is there any audio issue, Manishi? अच्छा. I hope voice is clear now. So this article is about Lakshadweep issues. Okay, the issue regarding Lakshadweep Development Authority regulation, in which many of the provisions which is against the Lakshadweep development that has been given under this LDAR, and which is not against which the Lakshadweep people, they are basically protesting against all such provisions which has been introduced by the administrator. So states intervention, Lakshadweep's future. Archipelago's integration into the mainstream should not lead to emotional alienation and physical damage. So context is that Lakshadweep administration, which is now facing a storm over its draft rules, which has been introduced by its administrator, it has now provided a fresh rationale for its proposals. It has shifting from public policy to public purpose, ignoring public interest, whereas strategic issues is the interplay of ecological fragility, insular cultural geography, and strategic location. There are two competing visions of its future. That is, so Niti Aayog in 2019 identified water villas and land-based tourism, which projects as the development issues faced by the islands. And it has suggested zoning based on land acquisition and focused on sustainable development by ignoring the fragile environment and culture. Integrated island management plan that prepared under the guidance of Supreme Court and National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management. In 2016, it has rejected homestays in the view of the strict social customs and strong resistance of the vast majority. It stipulated that development programs can be implemented in consultation with the elected local self-government bodies that adhere to the scientifically determined plans. So the provisions of the LDAR, that is, people are not happy with that. Niti Aayog in 2019 has already identified the water villas and land-based tourism projects that may infuse or that may boost up the developmental issues faced by the islands. And it suggested zoning based on land acquisition and also focused on the sustainable development of of Maldives. And in this sustainable development, basically, it has ignored the fragile ecosystem or environment and culture of Lakshadweep. It has ignored basically. So that is the entire issue. So the rationale or thinking of the appointed administrator of Union Territory that planning for flight loads of tourists through four controversial proposals like Lakshadweep Development Authority regulation, prevention of anti-social activities regulation, Lakshadweep Panchayat regulation, and Lakshadweep Animal Preservation regulation as the regulations of peace, progress, and good government has apparently not even been able to convince the Union Home Ministry. And for the local people across the political spectrum, these changes are arbitrary, authoritarian, and it will destroy the way of life. Administrators' fresh response is reliance on the power of government or public purpose for acquiring private land, unnecessarily opening the doors to conflict and the Supreme Court. Basically, what under this land, Lakshadweep Development Authority regulation, what administrator has said that the lands or the areas basically in Lakshadweep, the population are living in very smaller area of land, smaller piece of lands. Okay, they have made their houses. So it has been said that in the name of development, that if houses are not being built well, so in the name of development, what it will be done, it will be taken up by the government and it will be redeveloped. Okay, so that tourism can be promoted, it will be beautified, and it will attract tourists in Lakshadweep, and it will boost up its economic contribution. Okay, another thing is that for Panchayati Raj election institution, people who are having more than 2 children, they cannot take part in the election of Panchayati Raj, okay, or the local self government, or for the local bodies. In the animal prevention regulation, so in this, what they have said, that whosoever are in the whosoever are having slaughterhouses without recognized by government, and they are dealing with the eating up of beef and sale and purchase of beef, then their license would be cancelled, and it will attract fine and legal offense. Okay. Then in anti-social activities regulation, so it is basically called as Gunda Act. Under this Gunda Act, anyone who is against the government proposals, who is against the government officials, then who are protesting against government policies, then they will be booked under Gunda Act, and it for the prevention or as the preventive measures, this act will be taken up. This act will be implied. Okay, so people basically they are not happy with these provisions because of too many reasons. Lakshadweep is regarded as one of the peaceful union territory because it is having less population, it is having fragile environment. If on the name of development, if houses will be broken down and new houses will be development work will be initiated for the infrastructure development, then it will hamper not only environment, it will also hamper the dislocation of people. Sorry, it will also dislocate people who are living in the small territory. So administrators' fresh response is reliance on the power of government or public purpose for acquiring private land, unnecessarily opening the door to conflict and Supreme Court. Okay, so if they will broken up or unnecessarily if they will dislocate people, then obviously conflict would arise. What people are required over there, basically people want economic opportunities in Lakshadweep. Fishermen, they are not allowed to come near what's say coastal areas and do fishing. Okay, it has also been banned. So basically what the people of Lakshadweep needed, they need proper development, they need proper connectivity between all those 10 inhabited territories. They need connectivity with all the big states which is nearby, like Kerala, Karnataka. Okay, they need access, they need road transport, they need air transport. Okay, so these development they are needed. These developments are not required. Okay, so Supreme Court in the case of Dev Sharan versus state of Uttar Pradesh in 2011 has pointed out that any attempt by the state to acquire land by promoting a public purpose to benefit a particular group of people or to serve any particular interest at the cost of interest of a large section of the people, especially of the common people, defeats the very concept of public purpose. Proposals have been challenged before the High Court of Kerala that had in 2019 in a separate case. It recognized the special status which is given to the inhabitants for protecting their ethnic culture and traditions and to maintain the serene atmosphere in these islands without unnecessary interference by mainlanders. So in that way, Lakshadweep is unique. And it is an egalitarian coconut tree owning society with little economic inequality, a very high level of both literacy and unemployment. So Muslim community is designated as scheduled tribes over there. 94.6% of the population that is scheduled tribe. Okay, and Muslim population is also regarded as scheduled tribe. Land area is fully covered with coconut trees. That is main agricultural crop. Fisheries is the main economic activity that employs a quarter of the working population. Electricity generation is mainly through diesel generators, and it is very expensive, and solar electricity and limitations as it requires a large land area. So these are the basic problem what people are facing: electricity generation, then economic occupation. These are the main issues what government need to make policies upon, but not those policies are required what they have come up with. They need employment in the mainland. Okay, mainland, it means the states and UTs, the mainland. Okay, not in the coastal areas because it is having limited resources. So Lakshadweep administration that has framed the development issue as the development of the islands on the lines of Maldives, whereas the fact is that it is adopting a very different strategy without any real consultation. In Maldives, tourism since 1970s is centered on water villas in uninhabited islands, and it ensures that very few coconut trees are cut with limited homestays that was introduced in 2015, and few cultural and other conflicts. Okay, so that is the real plan of Maldives, what they are working upon. Uninhabited islands are being used for the homestays, for the tourism purpose. Okay, and very few cultural conflicts had to be arised. Okay, because they have taken care of. So Secondly, a one island, one resort policy that has kept pressure on the reefs low due to a wide distribution of tourist population. Third, business model is about giving coral reef economic significance where rich and healthy reefs are essential for private capital's economic returns. Fourth, tourists come because of the natural beauty and the sheer amount of marine life. Resort owners, they commit to conserve the reefs, and divers at the resorts are quickly rewarded with expensive accommodations and luxury amenities. Fifth, tourism provides employment opportunities for local workers and promotes tourism 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 Yeah. So basically in Lakshadweep, separation of resorts from villages that includes drinking water, sewage disposal, electricity, that gives priority of the fragile ecosystem, socio-economic conditions, and well-being of the inhabitants. Groundwaters that occurs as a thin lens of floating over the seawater and is tapped by open walls that replenished by the monsoon. All inhabited islands have scarcity of drinking water supply because of the coral sandy strata and high water table. So the existing water balance is already under stress, and inhabited villages cannot accommodate tourism. Why Ministry of Environment is quite about this is not clear. Meanwhile, public interest is being redefined, shifting the debate from private tourism to urbanization. Both are inappropriate for inhabited islands. Despite inhabited islands being defined as cities in the census, they do not need to be developed as smart cities with a focus on infrastructure that requires large scale construction and land acquisition. Irony is that the administration has anticipated public opposition, and despite of this, there being no case of murder, robbery, or local involvement in smuggling, new draft legislation seeks to preventive detention for antisocial activities, and it also covers cruel persons and deep predator of environment. So relation between state and society is being arbitrarily changed despite the constitutional protection. So powers of the panchayat that have been withdrawn on the grounds of corruption. That is an unusual step. Two-child policy for those who are seeking election to panchayats that does not exist in other union territories or states. Ban on beef has been instituted contrary to the practice in the northeast India. Liquor is being permitted for tourists in inhabited islands. So Lakshadweep basically it requires innovation. Okay, so Lakshadweep is a union district, union territory with a top heavy administrative system of more than half a dozen all India service officers. Essentially, they create work for themselves. Interventions should be limited to setting boundary conditions for both resorts and development institutions with income from taxing resorts given to the inhabitants. Active state interventions should be limited to generation of electricity in partnership with public sector units and water, sewage, and health, as well as education. Technology enabled employment in call centers and future employment in the mainland. So these are those issues, whether it is water related, water table issues, sandy, sandy topography, because of that water issues people are facing. People require technology enabled employment in call centers. They need future employment in the mainland. They need connectivity issue to be resolved in the with the mainland. Okay, they need electricity generation at cheaper cost. They need sewage and health as well as education facilities. They need public sector units. They need water treatments. Okay, so these are the ground needs or the requirements of the people, what they need to be work upon. They do not need all such provisions what government has come up with or the administrator has come up with. So this is all about this article. Moving on to the next, the promise and perils of digital justice delivery. Phase 3 of e-courts project can harness technology for service delivery without increasing surveillance risk. Context is that in the popular perception, Indian courts are not associated first with the delivery of justice, but with long delays and difficulties for ordinary litigants. According to data released by Supreme Court in June 2020, newsletter of E-Committee, 3.27 crore cases are pending before Indian courts, and out of which 85,000 have been pending for over 30 years. So judiciary, how they need to work in these COVID time. So E-Committee of Supreme Court of India has recently released its draft vision document for phase 3 of e-courts project. E-courts, it means it will work digitally. So phase 1 and 2, they are dealing with this digitization of judiciary, that is e-filing, tracking cases online, uploading judgments online, etc. Even though job is not complete, particularly at the lower levels of judiciary, project can so far be termed as success. This has been particularly so during the COVID-19 pandemic when physical courts were forced to shut down. Despite some hiccups, Supreme Court and High Courts have been able to function online. And this was made possible by the e-court project monitored by e-committee. So phase 3 of the e-courts projects, they have reached the stage in a trilogy where franchise starts trying to do too much and goes off the tram line. On the source, the objectives remain noble. There is commitment to the digitization of court processes and plans to upgrade the electronic infrastructure of judiciary and enable access to lawyers and litigants. Document goes on to propose an ecosystem approach to justice delivery that suggests a seamless exchange of information between various branches of the state, like between judiciary, police, and prison system through the interoperable criminal justice system. So it's been pointed out by the organization like Criminal Justice and Police Accountability Project that ICJS, interoperable criminal justice system, that will likely exacerbate existing class and caste inequalities that characterize the police and prison system. And that is because the exercise of data creation happens at local police stations. Data regarding FIR chart sheet. So that have historically contributed to the criminalization of entire communities through colonial era laws that Criminal Tribes Act of 1871, which labels such communities as habitual offenders. And this is of particular concern since the data collected, shared and collated through the e-courts project will be housed with the Home Ministry under ICJS, Interoperable Court Justice System. So several individuals and organizations, they have warned against the zeal of data collection exercises contemplated by the draft proposal, seamless exchange of information that relies on large-scale gathering and sharing of data. Data collection is by itself not an evil process, and data can be a useful tool for solving complex problems, like to address problem of case pending simply for service of summons. Phase 2 of the e-courts project that saw development of the national service and trafficking of electronic processes, that a software that enable e-service of summons. And it is only when data collection is combined with extensive data sharing and data storage that it becomes a cause for concern. So Supreme Court must take care not to violate the privacy standards that it set in Puttaswamy versus Union of India 2017, especially since India does not yet have a data protection regime. So whatever data court is having, that should be localized. Okay, it should not be globalized, so that data privacy can be maintained. Data can be useful when it provided anonymous, aggregated statistical information about issues without identifying the individuals. And that could be made possible in phase 3 by encouraging uniformity and standardization of entry fields. Unfortunately, there has been a dangerous trend towards creating a 360-degree profile of each person by integrating all of their interactions with government agencies into a unified database. This approach has been perfected by social media platforms and technology companies, and government is now trying to do the same. Difference is that when technology companies do this, we get targeted advertising. But if government does it, we get targeted surveillance. So 360-degree approach is the main objective of phase 3. Once any government department moves online, their pen and paper registers will become Excel sheets and shareable with a single click. localized data will become centralized. So holdovers for the analog age ought not to have an issues with this process, since it can lead to great advancements in problem solving. And however, it is this next stage which is a cause of concern even for the most vocal proponents of the digital age, which is integration with other agencies. So when integrating data from all the lower courts, the intersection lies in the higher judiciary, and because those are the appellate authorities that connect all the lower courts. And integrating data of the courts and police stations, the intersection lies with the individual citizens, since it is the citizens' interaction with these branches of the state that is being monitored. While it is understandable why the courts could reasonably benefit from access to police and prison records, courts deal with a variety of matters, some of which may be purely civil, commercial, or personal in nature. No clear explanation have been offered for why the Home Ministry needs access to court data that may have absolutely no relation to criminal law. And this process serves no purpose other than profiling and surveillance. Since phase 3 vision document is a draft and there is still an opportunity to abandon the ecosystem approach, the objectives were to streamline judicial processes and reduce pendency and help the litigants. So to continue to do this within the framework of our fundamental rights, these e-courts must move towards localization of data instead of centralization of it. E-committees must prevent the seamless exchange of data between the branches of the state that ought to remain separate. Technology plays an important role in the project, but it cannot be an end in itself. Technology could be imbibed in the justice system, but there need some protection, because India it has not implemented its data protection. Okay, so for that reason, data privacy need to be maintained, data protection need to be there, and for this, some standards are being given. So technology is required, technology is important, but with this, safeguards are also needed. Now, next article is about encouraging accord. The political will shown by G7 to ensure fairness in the revenue sharing is a good augury. So this article is about the decision of G7 countries, which they have come up with the taxation or the corporate tax that made globally, so that companies who want is being what is the term, who has been in this like some companies who belongs to some other country, but what they do, they have their business in some other country, or these are termed as tax haven countries. So all such countries who are working in the G7 countries, so they have come up, these G7 countries has come up with a centralized, or you can say a universal corporate tax regime. Okay, so that those companies who try to save tax, who try to flee away tax from the paying, they should be taxed. Okay, so finance ministers of G7 nations that appear to have heeded the advice of never let a good crisis to go waste, when they agreed last week to set a global minimum tax of at least 15%. So with the COVID-19 pandemic that have caused the world economy shrunken by an estimated of 3.5% in 2020, and it has forced most countries to dip into their coffers to mitigate the fallout. The 7 richest nations, they have opted to use the opportune moment to plug a key loophole in the international tax regime. In a communique, G7 ministers, they have stressed that a part of efforts to secure a safe and prosperous future for all, and they would strongly back the broader efforts underway through G20 or OECD countries to address tax challenges that arise from the globalization and digitalization of the economy. The rapid and relentless march of technological advancement, especially in the domain of global communications and connectivity, has resulted in a world economy where digital sphere that estimates in 2016 at $11.5 trillion, or over 1/6 of global GDP, is exponentially outpacing overall economic growth. Increasing digitalization has exacerbated the challenges of taxing multinational corporations, which have sought to minimize their total tax outgo by recognizing bulk of their profit or revenue in low tax jurisdiction. These countries are regarded as tax haven countries where they can save their taxes. So OECD, which is with the G20 spearheading the inclusive framework of base erosion and profit shifting initiative that aimed at ending tax avoidance. that estimated that countries are collectively deprived of as much as $240 billion in tax revenue annually because of avoidance by these MNCs. And as the OECD Secretary General noted in a statement that welcomes G7 deal, such distortions can only be effectively addressed through a multilaterally agreed solution. G7 countries also agreed on an equitable allocation of taxing rights, with market countries that awarded taxing rights on at least 20% of profit exceeding a 10% margin for the largest and most profitable multinational enterprises. For India, estimated to be losing more than $10 billion in revenue each year to global tax abuse by MNCs, according to the Tax Justice Network. And one of more than 90 countries have joined BEPS, that is Base Erosion Profit Shifting Framework. That is a wider agreement at next month's meeting of G20 finance ministers and central bank governors could have far-reaching implications on it. India may benefit from the levy of taxes on MNCs that includes technology and internet economy giants, which have taken advantage of the loopholes in the global tax system. And there are still wrinkles to be ironed out that include the issues of local levies on digital transactions. The political will to ensure greater fairness and equity in the revenue sharing is a positive augury. Next article, that is about South Asia's healthcare burden. Despite the debilitating pandemic, state investment in the health sector remains deeply inadequate. Context is that on 18th May this year, India has recorded 4,529 deaths from COVID-19. That was highest daily death toll which has been recorded in the world after United States in January had seen 4,468 deaths. So India is combating the pandemic. Its neighbors are experiencing spillover from the menacing second wave. Virus has swept through Nepal. Sri Lanka added as many as 78,218 cases in May. Pakistan has crossed over 200 daily deaths in April and its highest since the pandemic started. Situation in Bangladesh is precarious given the recent detection of the highly contagious Delta variant. Bhutan is the only exception with only one death and 1,724 cases so far. Country's success stems from a well-funded and prepared public health system with stringent measures, that is responsible citizenship and an accountable government. So as bodies had piled up at overcrowded crematoriums in India in the last few months, several things were to be blamed, like super spreader events, fragile health infrastructure, which has been neglected for decades, citizens are not following health protocols, and logistical mismanagement. These are certain reasons why number of cases has been increased and number of deaths has been increased. So what has exacerbated the situation is a subpar public healthcare system that is running on a meager contribution of a little over 1% of India's GDP. While the private medical sector is booming, public healthcare sector has been operating at a pitiful 0.08 doctors per 1,000 people. That's falling miserably below the World Health Organization's prescribed standard of 1 is to 1,000. And India has only half a bed available for every 1,000 people, which is a deficient figure even for normal days. Bangladesh and Pakistan fare no better, with a bed-to-patient ratio of 0.8 and 0.6 respectively, and a doctor availability of less than 1 for every 1,000 people. Ideally, out-of-the-pocket expenditure should not surpass 15% to 20% of the total health expenditure for India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. This figure stands at an appalling 62.767%, 73.87%, and 56.24%. Situation in rural India, where people are largely relying on threadbare healthcare facilities, is disconcerting. Numerous distressing reports have emerged in the media, from patients being treated on the hospital floor for lack of beds to some walking hundreds of miles just to get a bed in a hospital, and let alone with the oxygen or drug supplies, and many being left to resort to homemade concoction and local quacks. Further, so basically what happens during this pandemic, second wave of pandemic, many people, those patients, they find difficulty in getting beds. They find difficulty in getting drug supplies and oxygen supplies. So what they had to do, they had to rely on homemade stuffs. They had to rely on the quacks. Okay, the self-made doctors, you can say. So look at the further fact that hundreds of healthcare workers have succumbed to COVID-19 and unable to seek a bed in very hospitals. This severe is telling. And while India has worst third largest military expenditure, its health budget is the fourth lowest. In Pakistan, during pandemic, defense budget was increased by 12% in fiscal year 2020 and 21, and $7.85 billion it was. So while spending on health remained around $151 million, not too far behind its Bangladesh, with decades of underfunding culminating in a crumbling public healthcare system, pushing people to opt for private medical care, even if it means exorbitant health payments. Major public sector investments by Big Three of South Asia like India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh are towards infrastructure and defense, with health taking a backseat. A quick look at pre-pandemic sectoral allocations explains the chronically low status of human development indicators in three countries. South Asia, it can take decisions in pragmatic healthcare policy from Southeast Asia, which has prioritized investments in healthcare system while broadening equitable access through universal health coverage schemes. From Vietnam's preventive measures, which is focusing on investments in disease surveillance and emergency response mechanisms, to even countries like Laos and Cambodia, which is making a constant effort towards improving the healthcare system, and all have done much better than their South Asian peers. It took a debilitating global pandemic to push South Asia policymakers to direct special attention and resources towards strengthening the health systems. Though Indian government in this year's budget highlighted an increase of 137% in health and well-being expenditure, a closer look reveals a mismatch between facts and figures. Learning from the devastation unleashed by the pandemic, South Asian countries must step up investment in their public healthcare sectors to make them sustainable, up to date, and pro-poor. Most importantly, the system should not turn its back on citizens. And given the high chances of another wave or even the impending crisis of climate change, stop-gap measures ought to be replaced by a well-thought-out vision and political commitments for long-term healing. So these are all such articles which were published in the Hindu last week, and these are important for the examination. So we have discussed so far. So I hope it is clear. I hope it is helpful. So this is all for this week. This is all for today. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Have a nice Sunday. This is Preeti Sagar signing off. Bye bye.